So you're thinking about moving to Cape Neddick, Maine. Cape Neddick is a neighborhood in York, Maine. In today's video, we are going to go over what it's like to live in Cape Neddick. Last week we did what it's like to live in York, but I want to hit some of the neighborhoods in these towns as well, as people also want to know what it's like to live in more specific areas of these towns. So we're going to go over what it's like to live in Cape Neddick, where you're going to get your groceries, where your kids are going to go to school, so you can really get an idea if this town is the right fit for your next move or investment. So let's get into it. The very first thing I want to mention about Cape Neddick is that it covers a lot more ground than people think it does. If you Google the boundaries or the borders of Cape Neddick, it actually shows that Long Sands, Short Sands, and the Nubble Lighthouse are all a part of that particular neighborhood. But if you ask any local where Cape Neddick is, they're going to give you a very specific area of Route 1 that's maybe a half a mile long, or they're going to point you in the direction of the Cape Neddick Country Club, which is out on Shore Road right next to Agunquit, when in reality, Cape Neddick Country Club is in the Bald Head, York Cliffs area, which is another designated neighborhood, if you will, of York. But for some reason, most people seem to think that kind of that area of Route 1 to the Country Club and Shore Road in general, that's where Cape Neddick is. So we're going to show you around both areas where Cape Neddick actually is and the borders of the actual neighborhood, and then also where people actually think Cape Neddick is, which is really just referring to other neighborhoods in York. Cape Neddick is right between Agunquit and York, and like I said before, it is really just a neighborhood of York, but if you look at it on a map, it kind of looks like its own town, but it's not. So we're going to kind of show you what it's like to live in the area. We're going to drive along the beaches and get you close to the Nubble so you can kind of see what it's like to live here. The next thing I want to talk about is York High School, which is where anybody living in Cape Neddick is going to go to school. York has over 550 students, and it ranks in the top 10% of the state for their testing scores, which obviously makes it a good option for you and your family if you're planning on moving to an area like this. York also has some pretty good extracurricular activities and sports. They have a really good sports program. I know I grew up a few towns over from here, and York was always really big competition. They have some great teams at this school. They definitely put a lot of money and a lot of effort into having a good sports program. And obviously they have good test scores as well. So if you're trying to figure out a good school for your kids to attend, York is definitely not a bad option. All right, so that was the Nubble Lighthouse in York or in Cape Neddick. Obviously not everyone's going to be buying a property in this area. The houses here are clearly very expensive, but I do think it's important to note that, you know, even though you're not living in a particular area, it's still a part of the town. It's still a part of the neighborhood. So it is still what it's like to live in Cape Neddick down by the Nubble Lighthouse, and I do think that it gives a lot of people a sense of pride living in a town that is this beautiful. All right, so we are currently on Shore Road, which is what most people think of when they think of Cape Neddick, and we are about to pull into the Cape Neddick Country Club, so you guys can kind of get a feel for what that looks like. It's kind of up for question whether or not this is actually part of Cape Neddick. Like I said earlier, a lot of locals seem to think that Shore Road, for the most part, is a part of Cape Neddick, but according to Google, that is not the case. So I figured I would show you guys around the area anyways, just so that when people start talking to you about this particular area, you'll at least know what they're talking about. While this area looks really beautiful because it is super beautiful, fortunately there is a pretty wide mixture of properties in Cape Neddick. Even just on Shore Road alone, you're going to get everything from beautiful, beautiful, massive homes to pretty affordable homes, all in the same area. Another thing I want to mention is the grocery stores in York. We did cover this in the last video, but I do think it's important to mention that there is a grocery store in York, unlike some of the neighboring towns. But with that said, there is only one, so obviously it does get pretty busy, considering Kittery does not have a traditional grocery store, Ogunquit does not, which both abut the town, and Elliott does not either. So that is kind of the closest grocery store to all of them, with the exception of Market Basket in Portsmouth. But it is important to note that there is only one grocery store, so while it is nice that the town has one, it is going to get busy. All right, so that was our overview of what it's like to live in Cape Neddick in York, Maine. This video was obviously a little bit shorter than most of our videos just because we're not really doing this on a town itself, but what it's like to live in Cape Neddick, which is more of a neighborhood, if you will. All right, so I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions or you want to reach out or just talk about the area, feel free to give us a call, shoot us a text, send an email, schedule a Zoom call, any or all of the above, and we'll see you next time.